In the shadows of war, two hearts cling to a promise that might be stronger than fate itself. Will love survive the battlefield, or will the weight of goodbye be too heavy to bear? Stay with us till the end and don't forget to subscribe, like, and comment for more unforgettable stories. The town of Borispil slept uneasily beneath a sky streaked with smoke. Its streets, once alive with children's laughter and the smell of fresh bread from the morning bakery, now hummed with the quiet tension of war. Every distant boom of artillery reminded the citizens that the Russian front was inching closer, its shadow creeping over their homes and hearts. Yet in a small apartment on the edge of the town, Danilo and Roman tried for one last night to ignore it. Danilo stood by the window, the city lights reflected faintly on his sharp, olive-toned face. His uniform, freshly pressed, smelled faintly of gun oil and the earth of a training ground. He looked like a man poised between duty and desire, muscles tense, yet something in his eyes softened whenever he glanced at Roman. The soldier's dark hair, cut short for practicality, caught the last streaks of the sun, and the faint scar along his left cheek, remnant from a childhood accident, gave his face a rugged vulnerability. Roman sat cross-legged on the floor, hands twisting the edges of Danilo's jacket. His skin was pale, almost luminescent against the dull wood of the apartment floor. His eyes, wide and anxious, betrayed the storm inside him. The boyish curls of his dark hair fell over his forehead, brushing against the thin frame of his sharp cheekbones. He was no fighter, he never had to be, but in his chest beat a courage that refused to let go, a love too fragile and too fierce to bend beneath the weight of the coming night. "You don't have to go," Roman whispered, voice cracking as he finally met Danilo's gaze. The words trembled with desperation, though he forced a semblance of steadiness. "You could stay. There's still time. We could." Danilo knelt beside him, taking Roman's hands in his own. "You know I can't," he said gently, the weight of inevitability settling in his voice. "Every day we wait, every hour I stay here. People are dying out there. If I don't go, others will. I have to fight." "But," his thumb brushed over Roman's knuckles, lingering with tenderness, "I will come back. I swear it." Roman's lips trembled, and he bit down to stop the sob that threatened to escape. "I've heard that before. I want to believe it, I do, Danilo. But this isn't some training exercise anymore. This is real war. Every day there are soldiers who don't come back." "I know," Danilo interrupted softly, pressing his forehead to Roman's. "I know. And that thought, it terrifies me. But you're the reason I have to survive. You're my home, Roman. No matter where this war drags me, I'll carry you in my heart. That promise. I'll come back to you." For a moment the world outside ceased to exist. The distant booms seemed like echoes from another life. Roman buried his face in Danilo's chest, breathing in the familiar scent of leather, earth, and faint smoke. He wanted to memorize this moment, the weight of Danilo's arms around him, the soft press of his lips to his hair, the warmth that promised he could survive the night. But fear clawed at his chest. "You'll promise me," Roman murmured, his voice muffled against Danilo's shirt. "No matter what, you'll come back." "I promise," Danilo said, though his heart quaked with the same terror that had kept him awake for nights on end. He cupped Roman's face, tilting it up so their eyes met. "Even if the world falls apart, I'll return. You'll see me again." The minutes stretched, each second drawn out by the knowledge that dawn would take Danilo away. They spoke of small things, memories of the park where they first met, the old bakery that still kept its sign swinging in the wind, the little violin Roman had played for him once, filling the apartment with trembling, imperfect notes. They laughed quietly, though each chuckle carried an undertone of sorrow, a fragile attempt to resist the darkness closing in. When it came time to prepare for the departure, the room seemed impossibly small. Danilo packed efficiently, each movement precise, a soldier trained to survive yet now stumbling over the weight of emotion. Roman hovered beside him, unable to help but watch, memorizing every crease in his uniform, every scar, every line of his face. Before leaving, Danilo retrieved a small silver cross from his pocket and handed it to Roman. "Keep this," he said. "It's not much, but it's mine. When you touch it, know I'm thinking of you. Always." Roman clasped the cross to his chest, tears streaming freely now. "Don't leave me," he whispered, though he knew he couldn't stop the inevitability of it. Danilo bent down, pressing a lingering kiss to Roman's forehead. "I'll be back. No one else can have my heart, Roman. You're the only one I come home to. Always." The knock on the door echoed like a drumbeat of fate. Outside, the military truck waited, soldiers standing rigid in their formation. Danilo hesitated at the threshold, glancing back one last time. Roman's silhouette, small and fragile, framed by the apartment doorway, burned into his memory. As the truck rumbled to life, Danilo raised his hand in a final wave. Roman's hand mirrored the motion, shaking as it stayed raised long after the truck disappeared into the distance. The world felt hollow. The night stretched endlessly, carrying with it the scent of smoke, the distant groan of artillery, and the quiet, unbroken promise of a love that neither time nor war could yet sever. Alone, Roman sank to the floor, clutching the cross to his heart. Outside, the wind whispered through the streets of Borispil, carrying with it the weight of fear, the ache of longing, and the fragile hope that somehow, against all odds, Danilo would return. And in the darkness he prayed. The front lines of eastern Ukraine were a landscape carved from smoke and ash. Trenches zigzagged across muddy fields like scars, and every gust of wind carried the faint metallic tang of fear. Danilo trudged through the mud, the weight of his rifle biting into his shoulders, each step a reminder that survival here was never guaranteed. His uniform was soaked from a morning drizzle, and his hands, despite gloves, had begun to crack from the cold. Yet even in this endless gray, he carried Roman in his heart, the image of his lover's pale, anxious face the only warmth against the chill. Letters were his lifeline. Danilo found moments, stolen between missions and brief respites in the dugouts, to write. He scribbled on scraps of paper, the ink smudging from rain and sweat, each word an attempt to bridge the impossible distance. "My dearest Roman," he wrote in the dim light of a candle, the low hum of artillery punctuating each word. "The trenches are cold, the mud endless, but I think of you always. I think of your laugh, the way your curls fall over your forehead when you're concentrating. I carry you with me in every step, in every breath. I promise I will come back to you. No matter what." He folded the paper carefully, tucking it into the small pouch he carried beneath his chest. Sending the letters was a dangerous task. Couriers could be intercepted, villages shelled without warning. Yet Danilo risked it every time. Roman's letters, when they arrived, were his anchor. Roman's handwriting was loopy and careful, each word imbued with a fragility that mirrored his soul. He described the town's slow recovery from shelling, the stubborn resilience of the small bakery that still baked bread each morning, and the empty park where they had once walked together. The letters painted a world of peace that no longer existed for Danilo, yet they were a haven for his mind. "I watered the garden today," Roman had written. "The tomatoes are stubborn as ever. I kept thinking you were here, laughing at me for fussing over them. Don't forget, even if the war tries to take everything, there's still something worth coming back to." Danilo smiled, biting the inside of his cheek to keep from tearing up in the mud. "Coming back, yes. That's all I have left." Days turned into weeks and weeks into months. The letters became infrequent, sometimes lost, sometimes arriving late. The front lines were brutal, and every day brought news of comrades who would never return. Danilo's hands shook one night as he dug a trench for a fallen friend, wishing it could be Roman's hands instead, soft and uncalloused, holding his in a warmth the battlefield could never provide. Roman, on the other side, paced the floor of their small apartment. He read and reread every letter, memorizing the curves of Danilo's handwriting, the way he ended each note with "always yours." But with each passing day the silence between letters grew heavier. Weeks would go by without a word, and Roman's hope became a fragile thread, fraying with every news report of fallen soldiers. He began writing to Danilo regardless, sometimes leaving letters by the window in case they never arrived. He poured everything into them, his fears, his longing, his small triumphs. He told Danilo about the first spring flowers that dared to bloom despite the cold, the stray dog that had begun sleeping by the bakery steps, and the old piano that sat silent, waiting for Danilo's fingers to bring it to life again. "I don't know if you'll get this," one letter read, "but I need you to know that I am waiting. I'm still here. The world feels emptier without you, but I am holding on. Please come back to me." Danilo held that letter against his chest one rainy night, the trenches flooded and the air thick with smoke. He could almost hear Roman's voice, soft and trembling, a lullaby against the roar of distant guns. He wanted to believe, desperately, that he would see Roman again, that the war would not swallow him whole. But every night, when the sounds of artillery faded, a whisper of doubt crept in. What if I don't come back? The war took more than it gave. Friends disappeared, villages burned, and Danilo's body and spirit ached from exhaustion and loss. Yet in the quiet moments he found solace in letters that reminded him of home, of Roman, of the life waiting beyond the front lines. They were lifelines, fragile and fleeting, but real. And Roman, alone in the apartment, pressed each letter to his lips as though it could convey his love across the miles. He spoke to the air, imagining Danilo's replies, and kept the cross Danilo had given him close, feeling the solid weight of it in his hand, a reminder that their love, though tested by death and war, was not yet broken. But the silence between letters grew longer. Weeks stretched into a month, then two. Roman's eyes, once bright with hope, now bore the shadow of constant worry. Each knock at the door, each phone call, set his heart racing, only to remind him of the uncertainty that had become his life. And in the trenches, Danilo thought of Roman constantly, of the way he tucked his curls behind his ears when lost in thought, of the laugh that warmed him better than any fire. He wrote letters that sometimes would never reach him, each one a desperate promise, a vow that he would return. Some nights, when the world outside was quiet and the battlefield seemed to hold its breath, Danilo allowed himself to imagine the reunion, Roman running into his arms, the cross pressed between them as if the war had never existed. And yet, he knew that in war hope could be as dangerous as despair, that every heartbeat might be the last, and that promises, no matter how sacred, were fragile things to clutch in a world that demanded survival at any cost. Still he held on to them. Still he held on to Roman. Because without that thread, without that tether to home, he feared he would be lost entirely. The town had grown quieter, though not in peace. Sirens wailed sporadically, signaling attacks miles away. Broken windows and the skeletal remains of once proud buildings reminded Roman that war was no longer a distant threat. It had arrived, insidious and unavoidable. He walked the streets like a ghost, each step weighed down by anxiety. Each shadow that moved in the corner of his eye made him start, imagining Danilo's uniform in every soldier he saw. Letters had stopped arriving. Days bled into weeks, and Roman's small apartment felt emptier with each passing day. The mailbox, once a vessel of hope, now sat as a cruel reminder of silence. He wrote still, pouring himself onto paper, scribbling words into envelopes he left on the windowsill in case fate could somehow deliver them. But the void remained, oppressive, unyielding. Every sound was a trigger. The distant rumble of artillery, the shuffle of boots on cobblestones, the whisper of wind through broken rooftops, it all reminded him of Danilo, and of the life that might never return. Roman clutched the silver cross around his neck as he moved through the apartment, fingering it obsessively. Sometimes he pressed it to his lips, whispering prayers he wasn't sure anyone would hear. "Come back. Please, come back." The news of soldiers lost from neighboring villages arrived in fragments. Names were read aloud over the radio, letters left in waiting for families, flags folded in stark, ceremonial precision. Each report twisted Roman's stomach into knots. He refused to let himself believe Danilo could be among them, but fear clawed at the edges of his hope, relentless and unyielding. At night he dreamed of the battlefield. The trenches he had only seen in letters and on grainy news footage became vivid, suffocatingly real. He imagined Danilo there, mud streaked across his uniform, his hands bleeding, his lips moving as he whispered Roman's name into the chaos. Every dream ended the same way, with Danilo disappearing into smoke and gunfire, and Roman waking alone, the cross cold and heavy in his hand. Still he held on. Still he wrote. Each letter was an echo in the void, a desperate tether to the man he loved. He wrote of the small miracles of daily life, the stubborn flowers pushing through cracked concrete, the stray dog that waited for bread outside the bakery, the first snow dusting the rooftops like a promise of purity in a broken world. "I am here," Roman wrote in one particularly quiet evening, the room lit only by the weak glow of a candle. "I am waiting. I am holding on. And I will not let the war take you from me. Come back to me, Danilo. Please." Weeks passed. Roman's hair fell into his eyes, unkempt, his frame thinner from worry and sleepless nights. The city was quieter, yes, but quiet was never peace. It was the lull before a storm, the deceptive calm before tragedy struck. The neighbors whispered about soldiers who had disappeared, families torn apart, and how hope could be a dangerous thing when the world had no mercy. Roman refused to believe that hope was dangerous. He clung to it like a lifeline, wrapping himself in memories of Danilo's hands, his voice, the warmth that had once been the center of Roman's universe. Every object in the apartment, the chair Danilo had always preferred, the folded clothes waiting to be packed, the scarf Danilo had left behind, became a shrine to the life they had shared. Yet the silence was growing heavier. Each day that passed without a letter felt like a strike against his heart, a cruel reminder that war was not patient, that promises could be tested beyond endurance. Roman could no longer sleep without dreams of Danilo in peril. He imagined receiving news at any moment that would shatter everything. A knock on the door, a message from the army, a flag folded with precision. The thought was unbearable, but he couldn't stop thinking about it. In the still hours before dawn, Roman sat by the window, staring out at the broken skyline, imagining the city through Danilo's eyes. He whispered to the empty streets, to the wind, to the shadows. You promised you would come back. Don't let me be wrong. Somewhere in the east, Danilo moved through mud and blood, writing letters that may never arrive. He thought of Roman constantly, of the life that awaited him, of the soft face pressed into his chest during their last night together. He fought not only for his country but for the fragile thread that tied him to home. The thought of never returning to Roman's arms was unbearable. And yet, the war made promises fragile things. Roman closed his eyes, clutching the cross, holding it as if it could keep Danilo alive. He whispered to the darkened room, to the silence, to the world itself. Please, let him come back. But the silence stretched on, unbroken, heavier than ever. The morning was unnaturally still, as if the world itself hesitated, waiting for what was to come. Roman had spent the night staring at the window, the faint light of dawn brushing the cracked walls of his apartment. He had imagined this moment countless times, receiving a letter, a knock at the door, a call from someone who knew. Each scenario had been different, but all ended the same, with the knowledge that his worst fear had come true. When the knock finally came, it was not hurried, not abrupt. It was deliberate, heavy, carrying the weight of inevitability. Roman's stomach twisted as he rose, the cross Danilo had given him pressed into his palm. He opened the door to two uniformed officers, their faces solemn, their eyes shadowed with grief. Between them, carefully folded, was a Ukrainian flag. Roman's knees buckled. The world tilted and sank, and he had to grab the doorframe to stay upright. His voice caught in his throat before any words could form. He recognized the ritual, the folded flag, the precise creases, the quiet reverence, and instantly, without being told, he understood. One officer spoke, voice low and measured, as if trying to protect Roman from the brutality of the words. We are sorry to inform you. Sergeant Danilo Shevchenko died in combat. He was killed during operations near Donetsk. He fought bravely and he was honored. The words did not register. Roman's eyes remained fixed on the flag. He heard nothing else, no condolences, no murmurs of respect. Only the soft, cruel whisper of the wind outside the door. The air seemed impossibly heavy, pressing down on his chest, squeezing every breath from him. Roman sank to the floor, clutching the folded flag against his chest. It was as if the fabric could somehow contain Danilo, could bring him back even for a heartbeat. His tears fell freely, soaking into the familiar cloth. He pressed his face against it, inhaling a scent that wasn't Danilo but somehow carried memories of him. The faint traces of leather and earth, the lingering warmth of a presence that would never return. The apartment, once a refuge, felt hollow. The shadows clung to the corners, silent witnesses to grief too vast to name. Roman ran his fingers over the folds of the flag, each crease a memory, each line a heartbeat now gone. Hours passed, but Roman did not move. He whispered Danilo's name over and over, words cracking under the weight of his despair. Danilo, come back, please. The sentences broke into sobs, unfinished, swallowed by the silence. He remembered the letters, every word they had shared, every promise exchanged in the fragile hope of survival. The voice of Danilo, warm and certain, echoed in his mind, I will come back to you. Always. The promise was shattered, but the memory remained, piercing him deeper than any bullet could. Weeks later, Roman still did not leave the apartment. He carried the folded flag with him everywhere, laying it beside the chair Danilo had preferred, placing it gently on the piano keys that would never again play his music. He read the letters over and over, memorizing the curve of the handwriting, the rhythm of Danilo's voice between the lines. The garden they had once tended together lay untended now, weeds claiming the space where flowers had blossomed. Yet Roman went there every morning, carrying the flag, speaking quietly to the memory of the man who had promised to return. He realized in the quiet that he would live with this grief forever. The war had taken Danilo, but it could not erase the love they shared. And though the folded flag was only fabric, it became his lifeline, a tangible fragment of a man who had loved him, who had once whispered that promise against the shadows of war. Roman sat beneath the setting sun one evening, the golden light bleeding across the broken skyline. The apartment was empty, the letters stacked neatly on the table, the cross pressed into his hand. He placed the flag across his lap, holding it as if it were Danilo himself. And he whispered again, voice trembling but unwavering. I will carry you with me, Danilo, always. Even if it is only in my heart, I will never let you go. The war raged on beyond the city, unrelenting, but inside Roman's world, time had stopped. He had lost everything, except love, memory, and the unbearable weight of goodbye.